Eskom says it's in need of capacity, and what we are doing here is making sure that that capacity indeed can be given to Eskom.
50% of the things that you do break down afterwards.
Efficiency is a must for all manufacturing plants.
Well, of course, we are looking at the current state of electricity in the country, looking at exactly what are the options that have been made available for South Africans, and what are the implications on business, and most importantly, how is it that it affects the most vulnerable in our community bases, looking at the disadvantaged communities. So obviously it is your view debate this morning, so we've got various organizations as well as stakeholders such as NERSA, SALGA, for example, our studio audiences, and individuals who are really ratepayers when it comes to addressing the issues around power supply, and most importantly, is going off the grid a viable option? That and more will be the topic of conversation this morning. Now, we must categorically state that we had invited Eskom to be part of our conversation this morning. However, at the very last minute, they did cancel on us. But nonetheless, don't fret. The conversation continues here this morning, and we are conducting in front of the live studio audience, and as well, we are doing it for you at home so that you can join in the discussions and find out exactly how is it that we can move this issue around power in our country forward. I'm not alone, obviously. I'm joined by a very astute panel. We've got various gentlemen from a different arrays of the sectors of industry. Let's start off with Dr. Xakaza, who is the MMC of Energy from the Energy Department in Ekurhuleni. We've got Johan van den Berg, who's from the SA Wind Energy Association. Nhlanhla Ngidi is the SALGA's electricity specialist, as well as Sol Masulo, who is from City Power. He's a spokesperson at City Power. Obviously, this is also conducted in front of a live studio audience. And most importantly, you at home are a very, very significant part of our conversation. And remember, you can leave your comments on Facebook as well as Twitter. Remember that hashtag #LightUpMzansi. That is the topic of conversations. We try to get to the bottom of electricity supply. Gentlemen, thank you so much to the four of you for joining us this morning as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, first, we should start off the conversation by looking at this proposed tariff initially that happened that came out of Eskom, wanting about a 25.3% increase for tariffs in South Africa. Obviously, it went on, it was rejected. But from SALGA's perspective, why is it that you decided to side against Eskom and say, no, guys, we simply cannot afford tariff increases at this stage?
Thank you, and good morning again. We rejected this tariff because first and foremost, it's unaffordable. I mean, 25%, 5 times the inflation currently. Yeah. It's unaffordable. And from our side at local government, we actually serve the poorest of the poor. From our side, we are going to be laced with a lot of non-payments, which we're currently experiencing right now. Yeah. So for us, we support Eskom's financial sustainability. We do, but we told Eskom, please explore other options. Okay. And I actually heard this morning in the news that Brian Molefe was actually saying that Eskom is knocking on the doors of the BRICS Development Bank, which means they actually listen to our suggestion. But my worry is the government has actually injected the equity of 23 billion, and there's a 60 billion that has been converted into capital expenditure. But how is that going to be solving our problems? Is Eskom going to use that for maintenance, or are we going to still use these guzzlers of gas turbines? If we're doing that, it means we are throwing the money in the hole.
And of course, you mentioned a very interesting point here about how is it that we can effectively utilize this money. This 23 billion rand bailout that was approved by Parliament. From your perspective, Doctor, it was supposed to sort of cover us. Will it be effective? I mean, we've got Nhlanhla here saying that, nah, but this might just be going into a bottomless pit. In your perspective, from the Energy Department?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Faith, and good morning to the panelists, the audience, and the listeners at home. I think from us as local authority were affected by the energy challenges. But of course, the expectations is that we should give hope to our communities, that we should be talking about what are the really measures to try and assist, to deal with this type of challenges. Our households, they are expecting us to give them, faith that, amid this challenge, what is it that we're doing alternatively to actually manage the situation.
Yeah.
So that is where we're sitting, and we think to this end we've got a lot of positive messages. We've got strategies that are in place to actually try and complement the national government, the measures that they are putting in place, so that the impact on our communities, it is at least manageable. I mean, when I say communities, I mean both households and industry.
But of course, when you look at this issue around communities, which are a very significant part of this conversation, because it's the very communities themselves that say, guys, we simply cannot afford the various imposition of tariffs. We cannot afford power in itself, which means that local municipalities are left without having finances. They cannot finance themselves. We've got various municipalities that have been threatened to have the power cut off. That affects the people, that affects the poor. How then do you mitigate between those, Doctor?
Definitely. I mean, if we're to look at the current budget window,
yeah,
we had to, live with a shortfall of about 2%, because what we got granted from NERSA, what was granted to, ESCOM through NERSA was 14% passed to utilities. But we're only allowed to actually pass about 12% to our communities. So we're to sit and find ways of, dealing with the shortfall, yeah, including, what areas do we get to sacrifice of service delivery so that we keep, services going, yet at the same time we're able to, manage the energy situation and the cost, implications that come with that. And
so obviously this is with regards to bringing you into this conversation regarding the issue of power supply and where we are sitting right now in terms of the role in which City Power in itself plays in ensuring that there is power in the homes. How are you guys faring with regards to that?
I think it's important that we don't make the issue of power supply or security of supply an ESCOM or a utility or a city power or a municipality issue, but that we make it an everyone's issue. And that's the message that we want to do. We want to say, what is ESCOM doing? What is it that we as city power are doing? What is a Kurulene doing? What is an individual person in the street doing or in the house doing? I think if we look at the problem from that point of view, at this challenge from that point of view, from the point of view that says, what am I doing as an individual? What are we doing as a utility? What is ESCOM doing as a utility? What is a business doing to curb this problem? But if we kind of try to apportion blame and say, or to apportion responsibility and make it an ESCOM problem or a city power problem or an Ekurulene problem, we will never be able to get to the solution. The quicker way for us as a people to get to the solution is to get to the point where each one of us is asking themselves the questions. What am I doing?
So in essence, collective ownership of the actual situation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to deviate from to get away from the issue of saying what is it as city power that we are doing.
Yeah.
There are things that we're doing as city power to deal with this problem. For instance, one of the issues that we're doing, that we have installed, we continue to install the ripple relay systems.
We're actually going to go into the various systems that have been put into place and the solutions, and then we're also going to touch on a very pertinent issue, Johan, looking at the alternative forms that we can start investigating to find solutions into the power supply issue. Remember, it is #LightUpMzansi this morning, and looking at finding solutions and viable options for us as a collective, as stated by Sol here, in finding ways to solve our power or energy crisis in South Africa. Do stay with us. It is Your View debate. We're going to take a quick ad break. Do not go anywhere because the conversation continues straight after this. Still continuing our conversation this morning regarding the state of electricity in South Africa, looking at finding really plausible solutions for finding ways in which we can sustain our power supply, but most importantly, keep our lights on at home. We've got various organizations as well as stakeholders that will be joining us for this conversation, and also looking at the viable options. And of course, we do have our panelists as well as our studio audience as well will be contributing to our discussion, and we do invite you at home, be part of this conversation. Remember, you're more than welcome to leave your comments on Facebook as well as Twitter. Remember, our Twitter hashtag #LightUpMzansi, and let's find solutions to some of the problems that we are facing. Now, Johan, when we're talking about the issue of a power supply, you mentioned a very interesting point to me, especially when it was during our break, and you said to me that the people are not the ones that use the power as much as business as the one that uses the power. So that changes the conversation around, especially when it comes to issues around load shedding. Who should we be load shedding? The people at home who are not using as much power, or the industries that are the ones that are contributing to the load shedding in the first place?
Yeah, I think Sean is here, and he would probably say that they took their hit in 2008, when industry was load shed a lot, and obviously that's the driver of our economic growth. So, ideally we want to load shed nobody, and beyond that we want to load shed as economically clever as we possibly can. But I'd obviously also like to talk a little bit about what happens beyond, because we're in a 2 to 5 year period where we will be constrained. We don't know if it's 2 years or 5 years. We differ about that. But there's definitely a glass half full argument here, because if Medupi and Kusile had been on time, we would have been in a much better situation. Business would have grown more quickly. However, we would have still been complacent in many respects. So we're one of the most energy inefficient places in the world. 10 years ago, I don't know what it's like now. If an energy efficiency project didn't pay back within 5 months, people didn't implement it. So we have to become far more efficient about our energy, and probably the best advantage of what's happened is that the renewable energy program has been accelerated, and we've seen a 193 billion industry arise in 4 years. Installing about a seventh or so of what's already secured. When that's all built, it'll be about a seventh of the grid size.
Now, obviously, renewable energy is a very interesting topic, especially when it comes to issues around sustaining power supplies and in keeping really the lights on at home. But you made a very interesting point here about Kusile as well as the Medupi power plants, and looking at some of the statistics that are coming out of them, it appears as though already the first unit is in use, and they're looking at using the second unit in 2017. But we cannot confirm that, because we did try to get a hold of Eskom this morning to be part of our conversation, to which at the very last minute they, of course, declined to join us for the conversation. Do not fret, however, the conversation does continue, and we still invite you to be part of it. And let's hope that they're listening and watching, so that they can give us viable solutions, and we can give them perhaps a little bit of advice of how to keep our lights on. And on that note, let's hand it over to Penny, who's standing by with our guests.
All right, of course, we continue with our conversation this morning. It's all about keeping the lights on. Light Up Mzansi is our hashtag. And your comments are coming through on Facebook this morning. Elvis Neymar, Gina saying, we don't have to assist Eskom. They must do it themselves to make sure they deliver a great service to this country. They started this, they must finish it. Edima Jechen is saying, I don't think Eskom needs our help. They are the business, and they knew about this problem. But how? Because they see they can make money from our tax together with our government, they act like the problem is ours. And of course, earlier on, we touched on how this problem shouldn't be just an Eskom or government or local municipality problem, but it is our problem as a collective. Joining us as well is Abu Obru, who's you're from Sanco, okay? So Sanco therefore represents, it's a civic organization, represents residents. One of the burning issues within the electricity crisis is the role that the residents and communities have to play. Some of them are not complying.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Let's start by raising our disappointment on the side of Eskom not being available in this discussion, because Eskom, they're the major role player. If you talk the plants, they're supposed to be telling us where are they in terms of completion. If you are talking about the 23 billion that the state has advanced to Eskom, we should be knowing how is that money going to be utilized. It will not help so much to go to BRICS, the new bank, and get more loan, because at the end of the day, somebody must pay that loan. And that's where communities get seriously affected at the end of the day. We need to strike a balance on the point that Sean was raising in terms of communities and business when you do load shedding. You don't need to do it in a haphazard way that business get negatively affected or the communities get negatively affected. Learn from the city of Ekurhuleni, how do they manage the issue of ensuring that business people are not negatively affected. But communities around Gauteng, as Sanko, our major worry, of course, it's tariff. As much as we're not taking forward the 25%, but going forward, electricity in this country for ordinary poor people is still going to be very expensive. So we need to find solution very quickly. If it's off the grid, let's pursue that particular role, because you have people that are unable currently to buy electricity.
Well, there's an argument from, other parts of the world that's saying that people are paying for this electricity. NERSA is not necessarily saying we shouldn't hike the tariffs, but they're saying how Eskom is going about it is not the way. Thank you, Baba, for joining us here from NERSA. Let's talk about in terms of how you looked at how the tariffs hike was declined. But the argument is that we should be paying more for the electricity that we're using in South Africa. Isn't that so?
Well, first of all, I'm Bulela Ngetezo from NERSA. NERSA is not saying that people shouldn't pay for electricity. But what NERSA is saying is that whatever Eskom is charging the people, it must be efficient. There must be no markups that are too much. They must operate in a very efficient way. So NERSA doesn't say that Eskom shouldn't increase the tariffs, but they must increase them in a very efficient way. So we're standing in between Eskom and the people, and we're striking a very delicate balance in this, that we're saying Eskom's business must be sustainable on the one hand, but at the same time, the prices they are charging the people must be affordable.
Okay. Clearly, the community is disagreeing, saying that those prices could never be affordable under the current economic conditions that we're living under. And then joining me here is the SAWEA Electricity Crisis Committee. Bobo, let's start with you. What is the Crisis Committee's view on what's going on with electricity at the moment? You guys are notorious for... Everyone is saying you guys don't want to pay.
Yeah, we won't pay unless... we get a fair electricity that will be at least, how do I put this?
Okay.
One, the thing is, from the SAWEA electricity perspective you cite, is that we are against Eskom due to the fact that, one, we don't get enough consultation from the ground. Two, there's this communication breakdown within Eskom and the community, but since that Eskom is intending to install the split meter system, which will be affecting the poor communities. And again, we're still facing load shedding, so which is becoming a big problem for the community to have enough access to electricity. Again, the things of tariff hikes, it's like, people who are unprepared will be more affected from buying electricity than those who are using conventional electricity.
Okay, all right. Well, there's residents who are saying, I want to pay. I just want to know how this thing is supposed to work. And you're paying, right, Mark?
I am paying. I think I'm paying too much, and that's mainly because the meter that I do have, I don't think is working. Unfortunately, my municipality isn't as forthcoming with all my references that I've sent to them. But I think my comment is three-tier to the panel and to everybody here. It's about three key elements. Communication, and that is in hand with transparency. If we look at different municipalities across the country, they all have different approaches to how they conduct load shedding. If you look at Cape Town municipality, they do up to 2.5-hour blocks, and very often they do load limiting similar to the city of Johannesburg, and you don't get load shed. When you are an Eskom customer, if it's stage 1, you will get load shed. There's not enough communication transparency there. But then when we look at when it comes to idea making, we are looking for ideas to light up this country. And there have been many good ideas, especially when it came to the NERSA conference a few weeks ago. And one of the elements was power ships, for example.
Yeah.
If we're trying to have a turnkey way to bring power to our country right now, well, we can ship it here. Places like Pakistan, who also suffer from load shedding, have hired those things. And finally, when it comes to more ideas, we have a darling of South Africa named Elon Musk. He started a company called Tesla. He has developed power wall systems and power batteries.
So this is part of the solution that we need to look at.
We need to look at
what's happening in El Dorado Park.
Look, I just want to quickly pick up, just say to everybody, I'm from the best community in South Africa, that's El Dorado Park.
Okay.
And I just want to pick up from what I heard the representative from City Power was saying, that it should be a collective approach. In Aldos, on the ground, everybody wants to take it as our problem, but it becomes difficult when City Power is not really communicating. For example, with load shedding, just with load shedding, there's no advanced pre-warning that is going to go off. So when load shedding happens, people loses their equipment.
The load shedding is about to happen because I need to go to an ad break. We come back and we continue with our Your View conversation right here on Sunrise. We're back. Welcome back to Sunrise as we continue with our conversation looking at the state of our electricity. What role do we have to play individually in spite of course, what ESCOM and the other city power and the other stakeholders who are involved in the situation that we're facing. But the question is the impact that it has on business and the role that local residents can play. Let's talk about the impact of this load shedding on local business. And as a Chamber of Business, how are you tackling that?
Thank you. On a positive note, ESCOM is attending to the backlogs. However, it's very much an unenviable position. Secondly, from a business perspective, after the denial of the 23% increase, we did a quick survey. The results are such that at least 52% of the businesses in our membership indicate that we will reduce their after-tax profit by 5 to 20%. The 52% other respondents indicated that the impact will lead to them having to reduce the number of staff members. So that is just unfortunate.
So it's definitely a no-no from business.
Absolutely, because it's very expensive across the spectrum of business, small, medium, and big conglomerates.
All right, let's look at how that is being tackled in the city of Gruen. The role that the local residents have to play and business, what sort of approach is the city taking?
I think Vusi has just put our point very excellently forward. We really have to look at job creation, keeping our jobs, and if we are going to lose jobs, it just means more bad debt on the municipality, more things that we have to care about, which right now I think if we can keep the prices within reach of business, we safeguard a lot of jobs, and we don't have to talk more about that. That's the main part.
Okay. All right. So let's see if the other ingenious ideas that are out there that we can, may I squeeze in here, that we can look into. Name an organization that you're from.
My name's Sean Nell. I'm from the Energy Intensive Users Group. So I think the first thing we have to recognize is that the crisis is threefold. One, ESCOM's backlog. It's going to take at least 5 years to get back to some level of consistency. Two, the daily crisis that we face from a load shedding, how much is load shed on a daily basis. And the third one is the tariff increase. Because what we have to recognize is that electricity prices don't work like normal prices. As demand for the increases, in other words, as there's surplus supply, in traditional goods, the price goes down. In electricity, if your demand, in other words, business goes away, users go away, the price goes up. So it affects more and more people. We get into a negative spiral. So by reducing business demand, residents will have to pay more. And so we have to protect that. We have to protect.
So that we're going to come to a place where we balance it out. So your name and organization you're from?
I'm James Green. I'm from SAWEA, which is the Sustainable Energy Society of Southern Africa. What I would like to say is that nobody seems to be focusing on the low-hanging fruit, which is efficiency. And that is efficiency at home. Now, the extraordinary thing, if we look at load shedding, up to 15 to 25% of ESCOM's megawatt peak in the evening is attributable to hot water heating. That's one of the reasons the lights go out. So in South Africa today, we do not have one single energy efficiency program in existence. There are no solar water heating programs for RDP. There are no solar water heating incentives for anybody else. There is no solar water heating incentives in the commercial sector for industry. There are no incentives for people to go energy efficient lighting. So the low-hanging fruit for getting power off the grid and for benefiting consumers are consumer renewables and energy efficiency.
All right. Can we get off the grid? And if we do so, how do you go about it? And what is your understanding of that? Back to Faith to continue the conversation with our panelists as well.
Well, thank you very much for that, Pin. Of course, so that conversation continues. Gentlemen, we've been hearing from various audience members really speaking about some of their grievances. Let's start off with you. Untitled, we've heard the community of Soweto saying, we cannot pay. You know, as a result of that, obviously, we're facing from local government perspective where the pressure now is put on you. You guys don't have money. You can't pay ESCOM. ESCOM turns off the lights for them. What happens? How then do you mitigate between the two? Communication appears to be the one thing that is missing from here.
Thank you, Faith. From the local government side, from SALGA, we actually promote and support the payment of services rendered. My first question that I'll actually pose to the audience is, if you say you won't pay, how do you keep the lights on? Let's talk about South Africa and its payment culture. In South Africa, people will rather pay for their satellite TV and not miss that. But they would miss the electricity bill. They would rather pay for their cell phone contracts. They never miss that. But water and electricity, I can take that to the bottom of my priorities. Let's change the culture.
So you think that it's a huge culture or non-payment culture that we've really encouraged over the years?
Let's change the culture. And also my belief is that poor people, they try to pay. I think the most culprits are the people who can afford. People who owe most, you'll see satellite TVs in their houses and TV is playing. It's not closed. But the poorest of the poor, they try. They come to make arrangements at municipal offices. So poor people do try. But it's us who can afford, who actually are the culprits here.
And of course, on that notion of communication, so when we're listening to the grievances of the people, some of the people are saying that perhaps it was not effectively communicated in terms of how these prepaid meters will work. So people assume that it's going to cost them much more than they would if they were paying Eskom directly. And as a result of that, they're just saying, no, thank you. How do we mitigate between the two?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to be able to communicate very clearly about the meter situation in SAWEA specifically, as the gentleman said, because that's an Eskom environment. However, what I can say is that the installation of the meter does not drive consumption. You know, the type of meter you have, you know, it's not a major driver in terms of how much you're going to pay in the end. What drives your payment in the end is your consumption of energy. So how much you use is what is going to determine how much you pay. Now, the gentleman on the other side has been talking clearly about going efficiency in the manner in which we use electricity. And for me, that is critical, that as a business and as individuals and as companies, we need to drive towards efficiency. And there are various programs that I think we need to talk about to say, what can us as utilities do, what can people do, what can big business do to drive efficiency. The issue of payment for me, and as Salga said, you know, I believe that you're in a situation where you say Eskom does not have money. Where would Eskom get money if we don't pay? You know, so now we've put ourselves as a people between a rock and a hard place because we say we don't want to pay.
But then if you don't pay, you can't keep the lights on. I'm going to take on your notion of efficiency here and see if we can find alternative forms of energy. We've been speaking about going off the grid, but I want to introduce something, another conversation that has been had, and we went up in arms about it as well when it comes to this issue of nuclear. Johan, a very pertinent issue there. In fact, there's a statement here that says that the country plans to build 6 nuclear power plants by 2030, which is about to cost the country about 400 billion, right up until 1 trillion rand. What happens there? Should we be going nuclear?
I wouldn't go nuclear.
No.
You know, I think it's quite clear that we have a problem now to fix in the next 5 years. And nuclear comes maybe, if we're very lucky, it takes 10, 12 years to build. There must still be various, you know, approvals and environmental impacts. So that solution is 2030 and later. You know, but I mean, I'll tell it by way of metaphor. Technology is improving very quickly now. If you install nuclear, for me, you buy a 12-year-old mobile phone with a 40-year contract. And you know, is that really what you want to do, or do you want to have a smartphone?
Yeah. It's a very interesting question that we're having there. In fact, we're speaking about efficiency, we're speaking about nuclear, you're saying no to nuclear, we're saying that if you do not pay, you cannot keep the lights on. On that note, of course, we've just got an announcement by Eskom saying that stage 1 load shedding has been happening from 8:30 a.m. this morning right up until 10 p.m. this evening. That is what's happening currently. The lights are off. Let us over to you, Penny.
Look at your Facebook messages for this morning as well. Tukis is saying, I understand that we are all responsible in regard to the energy crisis, but I feel as if government and Eskom are making their problems ours. They should in some way claim responsibility because they have not put necessary measures in place to prevent this crisis. Saral Matuti saying, Eskom should spend money to their workers to save and improve its energy. And Samora saying, government must find and have other energy sources available and not have the whole country dependent on Eskom alone. We all have to be responsible for our use of electricity and think of it as a way of saving money, because at the end of the day, the less we use in our homes, the more we save. Sean Kemela saying, We can assist them on one condition, if they auction Nkandla to assist Eskom. I mean, come on, Sunrise. Let's say goodbye to our viewers on the Kasi Plus who are watching us on OpenView HD channel 105. We continue with our Your View debate live on ETV. It is Sunrise. Stay with us right here on Sunrise this morning as we continue with our Your View debate at 8:30 until 10 p.m. Stage 1 load shedding. And also do note that we did invite Eskom to join us this morning. I want to speak to Nersa. And then the notion from obviously from our Facebook comments and just in general, we all constantly just seem to be pointing fingers as Eskom. But from our conversation in studio here, we're saying that it should be a collective effort approach. Globally, how is the situation like this being handled? You know, from Nersa's point of view, who manage electricity, how are other people in the same position as Nersa tackling this around the world?
I agree with what people are saying, which is that there's a low-hanging fruit, which is energy efficiency. That's what we as a country should be doing. I like the fact that people say that we should get together and tackle this problem together and not point fingers all the time. We can point fingers afterwards. But right now, we've got a problem, and we've got all of us to make sure that we solve the problem by using less electricity and also paying for electricity that we are using.
Okay. Right, still talking efficiency. You in retail, you run shopping malls, Melissa. Obviously, it hits shopping malls. It's a big crisis. See generators coming up in shopping malls. Is it really working? Is that the way that shopping malls are being efficient?
Look, for shopping centres, it obviously built their shopping centres before the load shedding crisis. It is a big crisis because your bigger retailers will have generators, but your independent retailers won't. And that has a big impact on their operations and subsequently them being able to keep their staff. And I think the point I want to make is that, we instead of complaining is the sense of an education opportunity. We need to educate these sectors, retail, mining, and all sorts of things as how do we then operate within these within these times. How do we get our staff to use electricity more efficiently? What are the alternative resources for small businesses? Retail is one of the biggest employers in the country, and if it's under pressure, it's just going to simply reduce employment, which will lead to crisis.
All right, let's talk to AthLife here. I'm sure they also advocate for efficient ways of managing electricity. From your point of view, from AthLife, how should we be tackling the crisis that we're facing as a country?
I think the crisis is multifold. And the crisis being multifold, we find that it's also exacerbated by external factors, and including internal factors within the electricity generation sector. One is that Eskom itself, I think we are in this mess, in this crisis, because of Eskom's mismanagement, and also because of political interference in the running of the parastatal of Eskom, and how we can solve this. And I think this is what we have been advocating for quite a long time, and not just AthLife, all environmental justice organizations, including poor people, to say we need a decentralized energy system, because currently that's the problem that we have. If the Majuba silo suddenly falls, that means the whole country doesn't have electricity, or major parts of the country doesn't have electricity. So I think for now we would want to thank NESA for having at least applied their mind, because I think in the past they really also have been part of the complexity by rejecting the reopener application by Eskom. And this is what they need to do as NESA to make sure that the repeat and the refit system is actually accelerated, so that we don't find ourselves in what we have. But and I think at the end there's a need for a greater investment in renewable energy technologies, and also that
we're going to have to go to an internet break. Mako Malikalaka from AthLife there, of course. We're coming back and we'll still take some of your points as we continue with our discussion, because after all we're looking for solution to the problem that we're facing as a country. Our hashtag is Light Up Mzansi.
conversation this morning. Hashtag Light Up Mzansi. That is where the conversation is moving towards, finding plausible and possible solutions for us to make sure that indeed our lights have been kept on. But of course, in some households currently, as a result of stage 1 load shedding being implemented, obviously you are off until at 10 p.m. this evening. Nonetheless, though, let's find solutions as to how we can actually efficiently tackle this issue around keeping our lights on. From your perspective, Johan, how do we, going off the grid, first of all, how much will it cost for you to go off the grid? Should I be going off the grid? And what are the efficient ways so that I can start, saving energy and having more power?
I think you should distinguish between generating your own electricity and going off the grid. Those are two entirely different things. I'm very much in favor of, ultimately much more decentralized generation, rooftop PV, a very big field internationally. It's becoming extremely affordable. Going off the grid is going to be quite expensive, so it'll cost you somewhere between 120 and 150,000.
That is if I put in completely solar everything.
Yeah, the other people you can talk more to the detail, but that's about the figure. But also there's a symbolic reason why you shouldn't go off the grid, and that really means you would stop taking collective responsibility for South Africa's problems and say, I'm now doing my own thing and let the other people struggle with this problem. And if enough people do that, then we're not in a good situation. So. Yes, of course, we should be generating wherever we can in distributed ways, but we should stay on the grid because it's the most efficient way to generate electricity and yeah.
Yeah, and of course, on one hand, so we're hearing that perhaps going off the grid is not the viable solution, especially when it comes to issues around accountability. But let's say that residences, for example, that have been having their lights turn on and off, and I'm going to be personal now because our geysers don't work. Geysers don't work. We've got issues around alarm systems don't work. You were talking to me a little bit earlier on here, Johan, about issues such as this. So the effects of load shedding, how then do we overcome it as people? Because there are various effects, whether your geysers bust, and where do we claim for?
I think even before we go into individual challenges like your geyser, I'd like to explore the issues of what is it that we as utilities need to do or are doing to mitigate load shedding. And then we'll get into what is it that an individual person or business need to do to mitigate load shedding.
Yeah.
We have a challenge and then we need to talk to a solution to that. I think one of the things that I'd like to point out that we're doing from a city power perspective, and we will continue to do, is the installation of the ripple relay system or the geyser control system. Now, the system allows us from head office to switch off some geysers within the city of Joburg. So in other words, what you're doing is you're switching off geysers remotely from the city power head office to mitigate load shedding. You're saying basically, instead of having a complete load shedding, you're switching off geysers so that people can have electricity. That is one solution. And we have done that and we continue doing it. The other solution that we're doing on our side is the installation of smart meters. And smart meters allow us to do what we call the load limiting system. That means what you do basically is you're communicating with a customer in his home and say, you warn him in advance of load shedding. By warning him or her in advance, you are saying now as a customer you have the responsibility to decide which of your gadgets in the house you want to switch off to mitigate load shedding. In other words, you can then say, well, I'm going to switch off my stove. Because I'm not, maybe whatever I'm cooking now, or I can go and buy at the restaurant instead of cooking in the house.
Yeah.
In that way, then the customers contribute. So it is a partnership between utilities and a customer. That is one way to mitigate load shedding. Another thing that we're doing, and the gentleman was talking about, was saying no one is doing anything from a geyser, from a solar energy point of view. We are. I mean, if you travel on the highway from the airport, passing Alexander, you can see the solar water heaters that we have installed.
Yeah.
Now the value of the solar water heaters that we've installed is the following, is that when a person is sitting in a home and they want to take a bath, in the absence of a solar water heater, they will have to use a kettle or a stove to warm
But obviously
water.
it comes with the issue here of conducting electricity, making sure that it's very warm very quickly. Before I go to an ad break here, from your perspective, how do we become more energy efficient?
Yeah, we in the city of Ekurhuleni, we've been investing in different alternative and renewable energies, and we continue to investigate different strategies. We welcome all the suggestion. One of the few measures that we've put in place includes the rooftop solar plant, which we've actually rolled out. You will find it in the OR Tambo precinct in Benoni.
And we have seen it in various other aspects as well, as various other places, Doctor, as well. And we're going to be further expounding on this whole notion of becoming more energy efficient. Perhaps going off the grid is not the possible solution. These are more solutions that are going to be coming out of this Your View debate this morning. And of course, do join us at home with similar solutions for us as well. We're going to take a quick ad break. Don't go anywhere. We continue with this conversation straight after this.
Thanks for staying with us right here on Sunrise as we continue with our Your View debate this Friday, and we're looking at the status of our electricity in the country. Now, joining me is SAWEA Electricity Crisis Committee, and we're talking about solutions here, alternatives, renewable energy. What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, because I said good morning, everybody. In the first place, I wanted to go to, before I'm coming to the solution, to the saga. As he said, there are people that they can. Yes, you don't deny that. But it's not our duty as a community to go around or have a data of those people that can pay. We know people that they don't have money, that are poor. You can have a dish, but it's not working. Don't compare a person who's got a dish there with an electricity. And you cannot leave people with choices and say to the person, he mustn't buy bread for the children and go and buy electricity. And yet, they know they install this green and yellow box or gray box that you can't even know how much you must buy.
Okay, so you don't know how much you must buy, you don't know how much you actually have to pay a month, is that what you're saying?
It's because now sometimes you buy with 200 rand, only for 2 days it's enough. Then for the next 2 days you have to buy 150. And the unit's not the same. You buy for 150, you get at least maybe more. You buy 200 rand, your unit it's less.
Okay, so okay, all right. But what alternative solutions do you think residents of Soweto and other communities will understand? Sorry, I'm calling you Butbo.
I'm Fox.
Oh, it's Fox. Sorry, but Fox.
I think the sun is not sold. The coal Benguela current cannot be sold. Our wind cannot be sold.
But at some point you have to pay for something.
Yeah, I'll pay for the instruments to use and draw electricity.
What about for using the electricity?
I'll be getting it free. I paid for the instruments. I'll be getting it free instead of paying for estimates. They charge us estimates. I don't know what an estimate is. I wish I knew.
But is it really totally possible to get free electricity, even though if we're trying to be efficient? Is that how it's supposed to work? Maybe I'm a bit confused.
No, well, he's saying he's going to pay for the capital for the solar panels.
Yeah.
Thereafter, it should be free. And yes, I mean, I think that is an option. And National Treasury should be looking at ways to incentivize homeowners to buy solar panels.
Is that the low-hanging fruit that you're talking about?
Yes, I think it's important to look that in the lower income homes, only 2% of Eskom's power actually goes to those. But when people get home in the evening and they turn on kettles and hot plates, it results in up to 10% of Eskom's peak. Now that's the reason the lights go out. So when government stopped these programs to replace water heating and provide socio-economic benefits for low-income homes, it actually was extremely detrimental, and it stopped 2.5 years ago. And unfortunately, the current government and the Minister of Energy has reduced the targets by 85%, and they've missed their targets by 600,000 units by March 2015. So it's a critical situation which needs to be addressed.
Okay, critical situation that needs to address. Exactly how do we go about doing that? Let's try and get to some of those solutions when we come back after the ad break.
Of course, finding plausible solutions, therefore, our keeping the lights on. Hashtag Light Up Mzansi is the hashtag as we continue with Your View debate this morning, looking at the state of electricity in South Africa. That conversation is continuing this morning up until 8:30. Now, we were talking a little bit about the various solutions that have come up from the various audience members there as well, Doctor. But from your perspective, a small business comes to you guys and says, guys, I've got innovative solutions to making me more efficient or finding alternative sources of energy. I need you guys to fund me so that I can indeed run with it, so I can help you at the end of the day. How long does it take? And will you give me money?
Well, we have platforms for different measures, and we do encourage small businesses to come forth and actually share those with us. To mention just a few, some that we do in partnership with the Department of National Department of Energy, who would then have the energy. To mention one is the landfill, gas plant, which we are actually currently operating, and the people who've actually assisted to construct and even to run that type of operation on our behalf is actually small businesses. Some of the managers include some of the alternative and energy efficiency program, which includes, the type of bulb that we use and so forth and so forth. There's the solar, programs. All those are actually driven by small businesses, and we do actually give those platforms to actually engage with them and allow them into our environment. But what is key?
Yeah, it basically creates an opportunity for growth. What is very key?
Definitely. What is key is our, measures, because we have to keep we still have, are responsible for the reliability of the service that we bring. So the real test, for small businesses out there is to make sure that they are with us. They keep the level of service and the level of standard that we're giving to our communities in terms of the electricity supply.
Now, of course, on one hand, it's a very interesting point that was mentioned by Johan earlier on, saying that if we become more efficient, the less we can pay, we need to pay to municipalities. If the less, though, we pay to municipality, or the less amounts we pay to municipality, the less services that are going to be made available in the sense of services, roads, cleaning up parks, etc. So, in other words, we're between a rock and a hard place. Heads we lose, tails you guys win. How do we mitigate the two?
Actually, I think it's a good point that you are raising, and it raises the point which we always raise as SALGA to the government, to the national government. We need to have a proper and an efficient way to fund the municipalities, because the funding mechanism currently is not so efficient. Let's talk about renewable energy. Renewable energy program is actually at a national level currently, and the power that is the output is actually bought by ESCOM. ESCOM is the main buyer. Yeah. The municipalities are nowhere to be found. Can the government maybe try and tailor-make another program that will go at a municipal level? There's an opportunity that we might miss.
Innovation, it becomes the big word here that comes out as a result of these conversations about how is it that we can hashtag keep our lights on. Penny, perhaps more solutions can come out from our guests.
Yeah, I would like to get solutions from the community on the ground, because that's really where the crisis is. From SAMCO's point of view, some of the solutions that have been offered, do you think some of the members of the community will adhere to those?
Well, there's a message that we must clearly communicate up front. Residents in Gauteng, they're not saying they don't want to pay for services. Residents in Gauteng, they say they want to pay what is affordable. That's a clear message that we must communicate. Secondly, from a solution point of view, we still have issues of tampering with the infrastructure, illegal connection, you have issues of theft. If we can just be robust in trying to drive the message from an education point of view, we'll find ourselves at a better situation, because it causes problem. And the other message that we must clearly communicate is the issue of finding alternative solution. Johan, all the solutions, they must be there, whether we go off the grid, it's a solution.
Whether we stay and we pay for what we can afford.
Solutions, because various people, they can afford in terms of the gadget that are expensive to buy them, but some communities will not afford.
All right, we have to go to an ad break and come back and continue with our conversation right here on Sunrise. Stay with us. for staying with us right here on Sunrise as we wrap things up in 15 seconds from Nessa. Tatimbulelo?
Thanks, Penny. In 15 seconds, I would like to say that right now it's a little bit late down the line that we're having inputs into this whole problem. The price driver for me is the integrated resources plan of the country. That tells us how much capacity is going to come when. I think people should have inputs at that stage so that people don't say win now, that let's go into the integrated resource plan and have inputs there.
There. All right, 15 seconds from F-Live.
That platform of public participation into the IRP was not there. And NESA also, I think you have to take responsibility that you're also not facilitating those kind of platforms, since even your public hearings are held in faraway places where people cannot reach. As a solution, nuclear is never a solution, and there's no ways that we can toy with death.
Now you've got 20 seconds. You've taken 20 seconds. Mark, 15 seconds.
Follow the money and look at the problem. If we see that billions and billions of bailouts go towards ESCOM, a lot of this discussion is actually lip service. What we need to look at is what do we do with that money? Maybe let's convert that into providing to each and every single one of us as low interest bonds and hopefully light us all up for the future.
All right, light up Mzansi, Faith.
Hashtag light up Mzansi indeed. Very quickly, how do I light up Mzansi from your perspective?
From my side of view, let's be efficient. Let's use energy efficiently. We can contribute to this. Can I go back to ESCOM? Please, with the money that you are getting, let's try and maintain the plant.
Maintaining the plant. From your side, Johan?
Let's take the long-term view, bring gas into the country, build all the renewables we can, and be as efficient as we can.
Bringing gas, from your perspective,
Well, our commitment as local authorities is to continue to give access, reliable electricity supply. And what we're really encouraging is, everybody to come on board and take ownership. Let's communicate more. Let's assist each other.
Transparency, communication. So,
well, switch off what you don't use. Basically, pay for your consumption. Stop illegal connection and theft of electricity. In that way, we will bring solutions on the table, but we expect everybody, every single citizen, to come up with solutions as well.
Well, we've heard the conversation this morning regarding keeping the lights on. That is where we wrap up your view debate. Make sure that you stay tuned to Sunrise on Monday morning. We'll see you bright and early from us.
Cheers, cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Kilimanjaro.
Bye.